Now we will cover Lecture 12, Presentation 2. Hunting and gathering, foraging subsistence. Human prehistory is that of hunter-gatherers, foragers, living off of the land. Farming, that involves animal and plant domestication, did not begin until 11,000 years ago, and it took thousands of years for humans to become dependent on agricultural foods. For at least 6 million years of our existence, all humans lived off of the land. They were hunters, gatherers, foragers. Foraging population density, that is the number of individuals that can be supported within a given area, is tied to resource availability. Not all human populations lived in places where food was difficult to obtain. Now, all human foragers had omnivorous diets. If fortunate enough to have lived under optimal conditions with mild and stable climates and mixed habitats, they would have had a variety of plant and animal foods in their diets. Mediterranean groups, for example, could have tolerated larger group sizes and higher regional population densities. Think of these groups as conspicuous omnivores. If they felt like eating berries, they picked lots of berries, nuts, hunting, whatever they wanted. There were lots of foods around, and these areas could support higher population densities. Very important. However, some populations did live under incredibly challenging conditions. For groups that lived under less than optimal conditions with cold temperatures and unstable climates in steppe grasslands or frozen tundra and so forth, they would have had to make use of every single calorie they encountered. Northerly Ice Age populations, for example, could not have sustained large group sizes and would have ranged far afield because they could not have afforded to compete with other populations for foods. Think of these groups as obligate omnivores. They ate whatever they could find, and remember they had low population densities because they could not afford the competition with others for the few calories they ran into. So how did they obtain food and what did they eat? Lower Paleolithic stone tools indicate food processing of plants and animals. That is, the tools were used to clear off a carcass of its meat and skin, to break open bones, etc., or to cut plants down and process plants. They do not provide direct evidence of hunting behavior. So Oldowan and Acheulean stone tools do not directly indicate that hunting was involved. Middle Paleolithic and Upper Paleolithic tools provide absolute evidence of hunting behavior. A spear tipped with a stone point indicates hunting, not passive scavenging. In other words, you're not finding a carcass or trapping an animal and then dispatching of it. You are actually hunting the animal down. What is the advantage of adding a stone point to a spear? According to archaeologist Palavila, stone points increase penetration into the prey. If a point is broken or lost, the spear handle itself is protected from damage. It takes 5 to 20 times longer to make a spear handle than it does to produce a stone point. Some have hypothesized that Neanderthals did not throw their stone-tipped spears at their prey. Instead, they moved close and jabbed with their spears. However, some Mousterian stone points, that is, tools associated with Neanderthals, have impact scars associated with projectile use. Impact scars are produced by the velocity and force with which a point enters the body and hits a bone. Spear thrusting lacks velocity and force. Projectile point data simply do not support spear jabbing. As Palavila explains, there is no reason to restrict interpretation of early hunting behavior to placing the prey in a disadvantaged position for the hunter and killing at close quarters. I just love this image. You're always seeing some big hunky guy picking up a stone to take out a bear. Not very wise. Diet would have been consistent with climate. For Neanderthal populations in Ice Age northerly latitudes, animal proteins would have provided most calories. Warmer periods would have provided more plant foods. But if there aren't plant foods around, you've got to eat animal. This is a really interesting fossil specimen, and let me show you what you're looking at. This is a Neanderthal frontal bone leading down to its brow bone like so. So there is the front of the skull right there, and you can see it down again here for size. All right, so this Neanderthal frontal bone fragment was dredged up from the North Sea in Denmark. Based on carbon-nitrogen isotope analysis, the individual had a meat-based diet. Based on Danish Neanderthal sites, the fossil is estimated at 60,000 years in age. This was definitely an Ice Age period. Ice Age glacial periods would not have been ideal for vegans. But don't go crazy with the Neanderthal meat-eating hunter hypothesis. Once in a while, couldn't we just have pasta? During warmer interglacial periods, Neanderthals included plenty of plant foods in their diets. Plant remains recovered at warm weather Neanderthal sites include legumes, wild peas, wild barley, wild rye, wild wheat, acorns, and my favorite, pistachios. Early vegans returning from the kill. Wahoo! And not all meat came from big game. Many Neanderthal sites include the remains of small animals, tortoise, turtle and rabbit, birds, and shellfish. At Vanguard Cave, Gibraltar, 45 to 30,000 years ago, shellfish were obtained from an estuary 9.5 miles away and brought back to the cave to cook on hearths. Yes, Neanderthals had the use of fire. Evidence comes from hearths and coal. Note, though, this is not necessarily controlled use of fire. The oldest evidence of controlled use of fire can be traced to a modern human locality in Belgium dating to 13.5 thousand years ago. The evidence is an iron pyrite firestone with a deep groove, you can see it right down the center, from repeated striking to start a spark. Neanderthals probably also had this technology, but we don't have the evidence yet. As Thak, the Neanderthal, worked frantically to start a fire, a modern human approached the table and simply gave Thina a light. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, dating between 125 to 70,000 years ago, modern humans used Middle Stone Age blade tools to hunt a variety of animals. Faunal remains indicate that both terrestrial and marine animals were included in the diet. Notice seals were a big component of the diet. Seals are wonderful. They're full of fat, and this is very important because back in the day when people were living off of the land, fats were difficult to obtain. Prehistoric health, tough for all. Life was not easy for prehistoric humans. Like wild chimpanzees, lifespan was tied to dental health, and females in Homo sapiens populations had the additional challenge of birthing big-brained babies. This would have heightened maternal and infant mortality risks. And something else to think about. there were no x-rays to assist with resetting broken bones. Antibiotics and pain medications would have been limited to knowledge of local plants. Though I have to add, as foragers, Homo sapiens populations, so both moderns, archaics, and Neanderthals, probably had pretty extensive botanical knowledge. Several Homo sapiens localities indicate evidence of dietary cannibalism. Most prehistoric Homo sapiens populations included individuals with nutritional stress-related enamel hypoplasias and youngsters with advanced dental abnormalities. We're going to focus in for a moment on this child from Kafse. It's Kafse 11, dating to 90 to 100,000 years ago. The child was about 11 to 13 years old when it died. Notice where the arrow is pointing to. We have advanced dental abnormalities. The Kafse 11 child also provides evidence of skull fracture trauma, healed bone where some fracture had occurred and mostly healed up. The cranial injury to the right frontal lobe probably resulted in brain and other developmental delays. Skeletal pathologies in Upper Paleolithic modern humans from Cro-Magnon, France, also indicate traumas. 2 adults had fused neck vertebrae, not shown here, but that basically means that they couldn't move their neck, limited mobility through the whole neck region. And this adult female, both images are of the same female, lived with a healed fracture at the frontal lobe. None of the adults had healthy dentition. And by the way, I may not have said this already, all modern humans in Upper Paleolithic Eurasia, so Europe and Asia, are referred to as Cro-Magnon because that's where the first specimens came from. In 1992, paleoanthropologists Berger and Trinkaus analyzed skeletal trauma frequencies in Neanderthal populations and concluded that they had a higher than expected occurrence of long bone fracture and neck and head injuries. Among modern populations today, the researchers concluded that there is only one occupation that has an equally high trauma frequency of the same type. And you might think it's football, you would be wrong. It is professional rodeo competitors. However, in 2012, one of the original authors of that research, Eric Trinkaus, concluded that Neanderthal fracture rates were probably no higher than in other prehistoric peoples. Skeletal trauma frequency was simply high in prehistory. Both Neanderthal and modern human populations would have had contact with dangerous animals. At times, they would have been in close proximity to extremely large animals such as the woolly mammoth. And this is the French woolly mammoth. And prehistoric Homo sapiens populations lived side by side with some outstanding professional carnivores. The Monte Circeo Neanderthal skull was marked by carnivore tooth marks on its base. Cave bears were a particular problem, especially in and near caves. Prehistoric humans competed with cave bears for housing and for foods. Okay, you have to forgive the next slides. I collect cave bear jokes. Criminy, it seems like every year there are more of these things around. Look, George, s'mores. I just love these things. Crunchy on the outside, chewy in the middle. Okay, blame Gary Larson. All right, so now you are ready for Lecture 12, Presentation 3.